Hello, everyone, and welcome to Myth and Magic. Just to kind of get a little bit of a, introduction into what we're talking about. I'm really excited, if you can't tell. Originally, I was going to do just a handful of mythological creatures, and I started with my first one. And of course, this took me down a rabbit hole. And so this one particular type of mythological creature is going to be our segment. We are going to be talking about dragons. Who doesn't love... Actually, okay, I know some people don't love dragons. If you are one of those people, that's okay. You don't have to like them. But let me know in the comments if you are a dragon lover or if you're passive about dragons. If you can hear airplanes in the background, it is because we live next to an airport, small airport. But that being said, let me know, do you love dragons? Do you not like dragons? Are you going to skip this segment because you just don't care? Which is fine. I would suggest that you maybe just come along for the ride, because we're not only going to be just talking about dragons, but we're going to be talking the etymology, the history of them, and their symbolism. And there are so many different types of dragons. We are going to be doing, I think, 4. I have turned this into a very big project, and they're just, I'm only doing like 4 or 6 videos before I move on to the next thing. And so we'll see how many I have figured out. I don't remember. It's been a minute since I've looked at my notes because I've had this plan for a very long time. But that being said, we are starting with the Western dragon. And we are going to be calling this segment of Myth and Magic Legends and Fire. All right. Now you are probably thinking, lore. I am Laura in case you are new here. Welcome if you are. Lore, not all dragons breathe fire. That's true, but it's what you think of usually when you think dragons. And so we're just, that's the title we're going with. And we will be talking, I'm so excited. I write fiction, fantasy fiction, and I have included dragons in my writing, but it was a very long time ago. This is a project that I'm still working on, and I only worked with my very, neutral, what's already out there basis for dragons. And I'm really excited to explore that there are more than just the ones that you have seen in television. Usually it's the wyvern or the or wyvern, depending on, both are correct. Or the Western dragon. And those are the 2 main ones that you see, but there are more, and I'm really excited to dive into them. But we are starting with the Western dragon. Now, real quick, if you love or like or have a favoritism towards dragons, put in the comments and tell me, who is your favorite Western dragon? Now, Western dragon, think the 4-limbed ones with the wings coming from their back. Those are Western dragons, and we'll talk about that a little more. But I will tell you my favorite. My favorite Western dragon is Draco from Dragonheart. I grew up watching that movie, and Sean Connery is a dragon's voice. Yes, that's the end of my story. Sean Connery as Draco in Dragonheart made me fall in love with dragons. So he is my favorite. Let me know in the comments below who your favorite is. And if you need a minute to really get an idea of what a dragon is, you can tell me at the end of the video. So first things first, what exactly is a Western dragon? Now, unlike their Eastern counterparts, Western dragons are often depicted as large reptilian creatures with wings coming out of their backs, sharp claws, and the ability to breathe fire. In European folklore, they're synonymous with power, chaos, and greed. But in some cases, they're also associated with wisdom and guardianship. So Western dragons share a lot of similar characteristics with other dragons. They're often described as serpent-like, covered in tough, shimmering scales, with immense strength and the power of flight. Some myths even suggest that they possess immortality or near invincibility, making them nearly unstoppable forces of nature. And of course, we can't forget their obsession with hoarding treasure: gold, gems, ancient relics, books, anything valuable they can get their claws on, stashed in their hidden lairs, often a cave of some sort. But there are also like dragons who live in the forests and swamps and deserts, and they can make their home just about anywhere. Let's take a moment to explore the origins of the word dragon. It traces back to ancient languages. In Greek, you have drakon, which means serpent or giant snake. In Latin, you've got Draco, which carries the same meaning. And then that later evolved into Old French dragon. And eventually the English word, so Old French was dragon, or dragon, if you want to go in a little more of a French accent. I think it's dragon. Dragon, something like that. But eventually, this develops into the English word dragon, which we use today. Dragons have been around in human storytelling for thousands of years, but their roles and representations have evolved significantly over time. So let's break it down. In classic antiquity, in Greco-Roman myths, dragons weren't always fire-breathing monsters. They often appeared as serpent-like guardians, such as Python, who was slain by Apollo, and Ladon, who guarded the golden apples in the garden of the Hesperides. I have a little pronunciation. Wow, you guys. I have a pronunciation guide this time. I'm pretty sure I made it for all of my notes for dragons, but we're going to do our best. In the medieval period, dragons took on a darker role. Everyone has heard of the virgin sacrifice, the princess in the tower being protected or saved by her knight in shining armor. They often symbolized Satan, sin, or the Antichrist. In Christian symbology, a famous story from this period is that of St. George, and the dragon, or a knight, triumphs over a terrifying dragon, symbolizing good conquering evil. Dragons continued to represent greed and chaos in the Renaissance and Enlightenment period, often appearing in alchemical texts as symbols of transformation. They also remained popular in heraldry and noble iconography. In the modern era, so today, in literature and film, dragons were reimagined in new ways. No longer just villains, they became noble or intelligent beings in the works of The Hobbit. We have Smaug, who is a villain, but very intelligent. And in the film, Peter Jackson's adaptation, Smaug actually has more of the body of a wyvern because his claws, or his front arms, are also his wings. So they kind of took what is the traditional Western dragon, which Smaug was, and made him more of a wyvern. I can't decide which I like better. Sorry. Okay. But you have Smaug, and then you have Aragon in those books, and I don't have much to say about that one. I tried reading Aragon. I couldn't get into it, and I saw the movie once. And of course, we have Draco in Dragonheart. Now, each of these dragons are very different. You have Smaug, who's a villain, but very intelligent, and does the classic hoarding of the treasure. He's very, like I said, he's very smart. He does the riddle game with Bilbo. And then you have in Aragon, an intelligent dragon, and I can't remember what they did to her in the movie with whether she was more wyvern or dragon, like, but regardless, and she was also very intelligent, and she was able to speak telepathically with her rider, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what happens. And then in Draco, he is your classic Western dragon, and in this version of the Western dragon, he's very noble, and in fact, he gives up half his heart to save. It's very sad. If you haven't seen Dragonheart, go see it. The soundtrack's amazing. Sean Connery is a dragon. I mean, that's as good as Benedict Cumberbatch being a dragon. Like, it's an excellent film, but it also draws more on the nobility and the more almost human take on a Western dragon, making him very relatable and just an ancient creature who is unfortunately being hunted to extinction. Dragons aren't just mythical beasts, though. They're symbols. Let's look at how they've been interpreted across various cultures. So in Christianity, we mentioned that they're often seen as representations of evil, are linked to Satan, Lucifer. I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's any other like clever names for him, but it's not like Voldemort, where it's like he who must not be named or whatever it is. Okay, moving on. Folklore. Dragons are portrayed as hoarders of treasure, lurking in caves and mountains, waiting to challenge heroes, which is very much the Smaug. It's an AU. Now in medieval heraldry, dragons represented strength, valor, and guardianship. Noble houses often bore dragon imagery on their shields. This is more of your Draco. And then in alchemy, there are alchemical symbols or symbolism where the dragon embodies chaos and transformation. The Ouroboros, yes, dragon devouring its own tail represents eternal cycles like life, death, and rebirth. Let's take a look at how Western dragons compare to their Eastern counterparts. We are going to do a segment where it's just the Eastern dragon, but for the sake of kind of just looking at things here, we're going to just see what the differences are. So first, in symbolism, Western dragons can represent evil, greed, and chaos more traditionally, but they can also represent nobility and valor and wisdom. And Eastern dragons, they're more aligned with wisdom, prosperity, and power. So there's more of a kind of like chaotic for Western dragons, and then in Eastern dragons, they're just very noble in general. Just like that's what the culture has defined them as. Western culture, you're a little loosey-goosey, at least in modern culture today. And I'm sure it's also that way with Eastern dragons at this point. But again, we will talk more about that when we get to that video. Now for their appearance, Western dragons are winged, reptilian, often fire-breathing. Or I guess Western dragons are fire-breathing. There are other versions of dragons where we will see that is not the case. But Western dragons, fire-breathing. In the Eastern dragon, you have where they are very serpentine, like snake-like. If you've ever seen Spirited Away, Haku, right? Is that his name? It's been a very long time since I've watched that movie, but he is an Eastern dragon. He's also wingless, and they kind of like fly through the air the way a snake goes through the grass or water or whatever. You get the idea. They slither. They kind of slither through the air and how they fly. And they're also very often are divine in nature. As for their cultural role, if you're going back for Western dragons to where they started, they were antagonistic in legends, and then they eventually became more noble. I keep using that word, but it's what it is. And sometimes even as they sometimes taking the place of the sage or the old wizard when you're talking about archetypes. And then an Eastern dragon is a benevolent or neutral force. So a bit different in their roles. While Western dragons in their origins are often seen as embodiments of evil, chaos, or destruction, Eastern dragons are revered as symbols of power, prosperity, and wisdom. It's a stark contrast that showcases the cultural differences in how these creatures are viewed across the world. And of course, there are other places that have their own ideas of what a dragon is and what it symbolizes. Dragons have inspired countless stories throughout history. So here's 3 legendary tales that have shaped dragon mythology. We have St. George and the Dragon, and I think we're going to go more in depth with these stories later, but these are kind of just an overview of them. So St. George and the Dragon. This is a Christian knight who defeats a dragon, saving a kingdom, and symbolizing the victory of good and evil, which we mentioned before. Beowulf's final foe is an epic where the heroic warrior Beowulf faces a treasure-hoarding dragon in his final battle, symbolizing the ultimate test of strength and bravery. Now, Fáfnir in Norse mythology, is a dwarf who is transformed into a dragon by his own greed, which embodies the corrupting nature of wealth and power. And with Tolkien being very much a linguist, and he even wrote a version of Beowulf and a couple of other legends that were both Nordic in nature and in other cultures, I'm pretty sure that the dragon sickness that the dwarves suffer from in The Hobbit is based off of this legend. Now, dragons are not just mythical creatures. They represent the deeper aspects of human consciousness. In Jungian, I did not do a pronunciation guide for this word, Jungian, Jungian psychology, the dragon is often seen as the shadow of self, those unconscious fears and desires we must confront to grow. In literary criticism, we have many stories where the dragon serves as the ultimate test of the hero. It's the obstacle the hero must overcome to prove their worth. And there are lots of stories about this one. Cultural anthropology. Dragons also represent universal themes of chaos versus order and forces that we struggle to control but must ultimately understand to thrive. If you want to dive deeper into the world of dragons, there are plenty of excellent resources out there. You can check out The Myth of the Dragon by David Jones or Bulfinch's Mythology for a historical perspective. Academic studies on mythological creatures from National Geographic and Encyclopedia Britannica, I thought I was going to get that the first try, Britannica, are also fantastic further reading. Like I said, I'm still in this rabbit hole, and I'm hoping eventually I can take a little bit of my research and compile it, but these are definitely resources that if you want to go do some more investigating, to go check out. Now, this would not be a Myth and Magic episode if we did not give you something to go and see the Western dragon being used in modern pop culture. So first, in literature, The Hobbit, Smaug. If you have not read this book or listened to it, Andy Serkis, I believe, does an audio version of this. I am really excited to listen to it. I have read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, but I'm really excited to listen to Andy Serkis read these books. I've heard it's amazing. So if The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings seems like just too much work, I understand, but you can listen to Andy Serkis read these books, and you can 1.5 times the speed, 2 times the speed, whatever floats your boat. That is one. The Hobbit is where you can see an example of a Western dragon in literature. And if you are a hardcore Tolkien fan, you can also see, let me see if I can pronounce these correctly. I did not get pronunciation for these either. I missed some, but Glorung and Ancalagon in Tolkien's broader legendarium. So you can go find those guys in more of his kind of like extended works. In TV and film, Game of Thrones gave us Dragon, Rhaegal, and Viserion. I did not watch. I cannot say. I've heard it's amazing, but the ending was a thing. I can't tell you whether... I can't recommend them either way. But there is also a book, Game of Thrones, where you can also read about these dragons. But they are majestic and terrifying creatures that redefined dragons for a new generation. I'm going to be honest, I don't know if they are technically Western dragons in the original work, or if they were wyverns, because their physicality, the way they are structured in the show, as far as I remember, they look more like wyverns. I don't know either way. But you also have Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon, and if I am remembering correctly, he is, though, of a smaller build, technically of Western dragon design, though he does not breathe fire. So he is kind of a more creative take on the Western dragon, and that we may go through and find that he fits better into a different category of dragon. It's been a minute since I wrote all of this stuff up, and so I cannot remember specifically all of the dragons that I have planned for this segment. So we will see. We also have video games where Western dragons appear in the franchise, like the Elder Scrolls and Dragon Age and Dark Souls, and they're often as formidable bosses or ancient beings of lore. In comics and animation, you have Mushu from Mulan, which is the Eastern dragon, so note there, not a Western dragon. And then we have Ember from My Little Pony. In comics and animation, there's really not a whole lot that I have found specifically. I just did a quick Google search, and all of the ones in comics and animation seem to be more of the Eastern persuasion, but I am sure that there is animated Western dragons, and it's just not coming to mind off the top of my head. So if you know of any, comment below and tell me, and make me feel like a fool for not thinking of it. And then, of course, you have merchandise and mascots. From sports teams to fantasy-themed merchandise, Western dragons are everywhere, often symbolizing strength, danger, or mystery. You have Dungeons and Dragons. Their comic cover, or their art cover for their games and stuff, Western dragon. And also, if you watch Critical Role, you often see a Western-style dragon being used. Oh, there it is! Critical Role. In Critical Role, the Vox Machina animation. There's a plane. In the Vox Machina animation, and also in their live role-play campaign, you have the main dragon boss was your flaming fire Western-styled dragon. D&D has gone and taken the idea of the dragon and basically made it so that you have different versions, body styles, and breath weapons. And that's part of the evolution of the Western dragon, is that you will now see them breathing ice or like acid clouds and spit and things like that. So if you are trying to be creative and write about Western dragons, don't feel like you have to be pigeonholed. This is fantasy. This is mythology. And there are people who argue that dragons were a real life thing. They were real, which who knows, maybe they were. But as far as your creativity goes, one thing that we like to say, and well, at least I like to say, is creative license. Honestly, you have the option to just make it up, do whatever. This is just your kind of like what Western dragons traditionally are, but even that has evolved from their origins as these evil beings who were simply an obstacle for the hero to grow. Now they are their own archetype, character. You even have like a lot of fantasy, especially in the romantasy genre, where you will have dragons who are also can take on the shape of humans or something like that, or it's kind of like wishy-washy on whether they are animal, beast, or because of their intelligence and sentience, if it's more like an elf thing. So there's still a race of humanoid, but dragon? Question mark. I've not delved into the idea of writing a romantasy with the dragon as... Oh, that's not true. That's not true. One of my more recent stories. He never turns into a dragon, though, because complications with this world. But I did do that. We're going to end the video. See there. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. So this is enemies to lovers story. And the main character, a villainess is kind of how she's been titled. I haven't decided what her background is going to be species-wise, but she kidnaps this gentleman, and also has a companion who works for her, who is also, she doesn't know these guys are dragons, but yeah, they are. They're both dragons. And one was banished from Dragon Realm. The other is there as kind of a protector. There is a kingdom that is ruled in the human world, that is ruled by dragons. And this Marquis, he goes through things, and I don't know what to tell you without spoiling. I hope to publish it someday. And that is, I don't know. I did a very bad job of explaining. But it is, I don't know. I think the big selling point is that it's a countess who kidnaps a marquis as kind of a hostage situation, and enemies to lovers. I don't know what she is yet. There has to be some kind of background because she's way too powerful to be human. I just don't know what she is yet. And he's, well. Okay, that's it. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope that this video has brought some light into your life, has sparked some creativity, some ideas. I think it's important to know the origins of something so that you can work with it, mold it, and make it into your own. So if you want a Western dragon who looks like a wyvern, it's already been done. So it's like people are breaking the rules already. Just do it. Have fun. All right. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Stay kind, or be kind, please. We need that in this world. And that's it. I will see you next time. Bye.